Stamp Swap. This is a game where we are stamp collectors. We're going to StampCon, where I guess stamp enthusiasts exchange stamps. What else? They're stamp enthusiasts. And if you like drafting games, you are in luck, because this is a double drafting game, meaning first you're going to have some open drafting, and then the things that you draft are going to be drafted again in a cut you choose manner. So as we said, we are at a stamp convention, and here we have a board in the middle of you're going to place in the middle of the play area. That reminds us that the game is divided into 3 days. Each day has 3 phases, plus the last day has an extra phase, which is a final show. And that's and you use this marker as a reminder of which phase you're playing. Then here we have 5 spots for 5 different scoring conditions. One based on the color of the stamps, one on the theme, and one on the small squares, cancel stamps, and then one for the final showing the final phase. But each of these could be multiple things, so you're only going to use one of these cards per game. So you're going to have a huge variety of what's going to score. And some things is simply will score if you have them in your album, in your play area. Doesn't matter where. Some will require them to be next to each other to score. For example, here you choose one of your themes and you put it in a group. And so again, like I do, you can cheat a little, making sure that the scoring conditions have a mix of things that require some spatial reasoning and some that don't, because it's more fun that way. And the same idea for the final show. You may have points for complete edges of your album, 1 by 2 holes in your albums, perfect corners, tiny holes, and things like that. So, how do we do it? At the beginning of each day, we use this deck of cards here. We shuffle it, and then we draw 3, and we place them the way I placed them right there for you. Each card has a game effect, but you're going to place them so that you only see the game effect of one of them, and you see the top, however, of all 3 of them, because that will randomly determine the offer of items that are going to be drafted that are available in that day of intense stamp scouting and trading. And so that's, for example, I drew those 3 cards, and then I created the pool of items here. So you're gonna have a mix of stamps of different sizes, and some are gonna be face up and some face down. Also cards that come from this deck and will give you exhibitor powers, meaning extra ways of scoring. Also specialist powers, which actually give you different effects. Tiny forever stamps, and also the first player's token. Once you have determined who that player is, this will also be placed as one of the items to be drafted during the first drafting phase of each day. The stamps are stored in this nice plastic organizer, and I really like it because shuffling, stacks and stacks of these cardboard tiles will be complicated, but this way I shuffle some, I move them around, and that's my rudimentary way of shuffling tiles thanks to this plastic organizer. Since we're here, maybe I'll show you some of these stamps. Oh, bad one. This is a negative value. Who wants those like messed up stamps? Am I right? So stamps will have a value which may be negative, which may be canceled, therefore 0. Finally, a positive one. And the value must always be kept in the top right corner. So the value also tells you the mandatory orientation that this stamp will have in your album. And some are very rare. Look at them, shiny, very nice. Which mean they will give you a lot of points. They are the most valuable in terms of sheer points, but they don't work so well for scoring combinations of the cards that I showed you earlier. And again, we have the rectangles, the small rectangles, the large rectangles up there, each representing either a long stamp, a large stamp, or 2 stamps. the tiny forever stamps. Good to fill a tiny hole, unless the condition of the final show makes tiny holes good, so you don't want those. Then we have the large squares. Ooh, very pretty. Large squares and the small squares here. You can see that each stamp has a specific theme and also a specific color. And maybe the color is the one thing that people have complained when I played it, and I myself am not super happy. The color is not always super obvious. It kind of is, but sometimes is that red? Is that what is it exactly? I mean, some are pretty obvious. Yay, green. But sometimes there's been a little more ambiguity. And when it comes to themes and colors, you're going to have your player aid, which both tells you the phases of the game and also reminds you what the options are. And sometimes yellow and brown, those are the ones that people have to look twice. That's not a big deal, but I'd mention that. Now I'm going to put them back so I don't lose them. Now, so we set up the round by drawing those 3 cards, as I told you, and that will tell us what items are available for this day, and we'll also create a unique condition for this day. You know what? I also played the game with very young people, and I simply ignored that event for the day. No problem whatsoever. We didn't miss it. I mean, it's more interesting if you're playing with your adult friends. Why not? But it's also not strictly necessary if you want to introduce a young player to the game. Did I mention it's a drafting game? Yes, and you're gonna draft those items. You're gonna draft 6 of them, and you're gonna place them here in the slots of your personal album. And so suppose I decide to draft this one, and I put it in the slot number 1. I'll show you later what that means. Another player drafts something else. Now, when you draft a face down, you can look at it, but you don't show it yet. And suppose that we're drafting and drafting and drafting. I'm just gonna grab 6 of these items to show you how the game may go. So, after that, after everybody has collected 6 items, here we go, and one of them may be the first player's token. Incidentally, if no one collects it, then it goes to the last player to choose something. Suppose it was me. So now, you can reserve one of the items that you collected, but not a rare one, so not the gold ones. That's thematically a little strange that those are the ones that you're not allowed to reserve, but that's the way it goes. And say I really want to have this one because reasons, and I reserve that. Then I take my other stuff that I have here and I divide it into 2 piles. And that's the second drafting, which is I cut, you choose. You will place the 2 piles on top of your album here, and then starting with the first player, you will basically select something from another player and take it. And the player, after somebody selects something from them, whatever is left is saved, so it goes under their thing. So basically, at the end of this round of I cut, you choose drafting, which you go around in player's order. One of the 2 piles that you prepare goes to somebody else, and the other one stays with you, and you will keep a pile that comes from somebody else. You will have a pile that you grab from somebody else. Now it is finally time to stick our new stamps to the album, and you just do that. You place your new stamps, keeping the orientation top right corner there, and you place them anywhere that is legal, that is allowed, you know, no funny business like that. Once they are attached, you cannot detach them. I'm really doing things randomly here. It's probably terrible in terms of scoring and things, but that's what I did. Also, again, yay, I got a special list, which gives me this ability here, and I place it there for now. Then, we score what we did for the day, because it's our little show. We go back to remember those 4 cards. during the game, each player will get to score 3 of them, 3 of those 4, not all 4, and you'll decide which one you want to score at the end of each day. So after I attach my new stamps to the album, each player has 3 tickets. I choose one and I place it on the condition I want to score, and you can score each only once. For example, I choose the one color in one group with 3 points per stamp. I got a group of 2 green stamps, group because they're next to each other. That's the best I have, so I score 6 points there, like so. So as you can imagine, had I scored this one at the end of the 3rd day, after maybe I had a big green group, it would have been bigger. So the scoring becomes more exciting and players score more points as the game progresses. Maybe I'll score this one at the end of day 2 and this one at the end of day 3. So we will collect points as we progress. And finally, we go to the final show, meaning final scoring at the end of the 3rd day. First, we check who has the most forever stamps, these tiny guys. The most is 10 points, then 6, then 3. Then we simply look at the sheer naked value of the stamps. So the number printed in the top right corner, that would be 10 points, for example. Then we look at the specialist cards. Each will give us 3 points. There's a reminder there. Then we look at the exhibitors also. We should score the exhibitors. So that's super important. Super important, the exhibitors that you will have. And then there you go. And then we check the final contest card. So we score points on that one. Once you have completed the final score, added those points to your total, the player with the highest score wins the game. Stamp Swap is a really fun game. I like it. It has some of my favorite mechanics. I like drafting, especially the open drafting. I can't choose. I like it, but I'm just not particularly good at it, and I find it emotionally very, very taxing. I always double, second, triple, third guess myself, and there's never a case where I'm satisfied with what I put out, and whatever the opponent takes, I'm always unhappy with it. But that's just my psychological thing. I like open drafting, yay, awesome. And I like tile laying, so this is really good. Which is also why I prefer the scoring situations where there is more of a spatial element, more of a puzzle element, which is not always the case, it's not always necessary. But when you have both, then you have the puzzle of drafting the right things, combining the right things to score those things. But then to me, the added value also figuring out how to combine them, not just which ones to select, which ones to remove from other players, of course, to take from their pools so they don't get to use them. All are very interesting decisions. And another interesting decision to me is when to score what, which has a little bit of a push your luck in a sense. I may score this set here right now, which seems good enough, but if I keep it for next round, I may get a lot more of that kind of situation, and that may not pan out, may not pay off. So there are a lot of nice, interesting angles here. The game is simple, it's smooth. The phases of the game, sometimes they almost feel like mini games. They are not. It's smooth overall, but you do very different things. And the selection, when you take the cards out and when you put down all the items for the day, can be a little bit an interruption, but it's not a big deal. It's not a deal breaker in any case. It's just that the gameplay is overall smooth, by which I mean it's nice to choose certain things and then divide them into groups, hoping that you get what you want, and then place them in on the album, and then scoring a certain thing. But somehow the transition from one phase to the other is slightly bumpy, but again, no big deal whatsoever. The game is extremely pretty, and even prettier when you start forming those stamps and creating those patterns on your album. But precisely because of that, sometimes I wish there was a little more obvious contrast. Sometimes you have to look twice to make sure that one thing is one color rather than the other. The themes are usually pretty obvious, but that was a decision that was made again. A game that was made, I guess. A game that's extremely pretty and it's not 100%, maybe 90%, 90% functional, which is pretty neat, pretty good. But again, if I'm pointing out these tiny things, it's because I overall like the idea very much. I played it with 2 people and with 3 people. I like them both. With 2 is a lot faster, 3 a little less, but you have more interaction there. I don't know that I would want to play with 4, then I'm afraid there may be a little bit of a analysis paralysis because I had to wait for longer while other players are looking at more possible piles, so there are more options to consider. I don't know, 2 or 3 I'm perfectly happy. There is also a solitaire version, which I haven't tried these days. I know I'm not a big fan of playing against the automa because I got family members who are in the right age, right time to play with me, so I don't play so many of those, but hey, the option is here if you enjoyed that. So Stamp Swap, it's a pretty solid game. As I said, there are a couple of very minor nitpicks there, which I'm pointing out maybe just to, I don't know, to show you that I took some time to think about the game, but the game overall is really fun. It's really solid. It has 2 of my favorite mechanics, and overall I enjoyed it quite a bit.